Got a beach, erosion, mindless forces. Create a hole, arguably order.
Wait, so you have a beach, and a hole erodes in the beach, and you say that's arguably order. Wasn't your whole thing that mindless forces don't create order?
I said that mindless forces cannot create order at the level of a sandcastle. I told you, remember? I set the bar at the level of a sandcastle.
So if the whole is arguably order, but your assertion is that mindless forces don't create order...
That's a strawman fallacy. Again, my assertion is not that mindless forces cannot create order. My proven points with all of history to prove it, and all beaches, go ahead and show me footage otherwise. My proven point is that at the level of a sandcastle, that order cannot be unintended.
Shouldn't we...
And it's not just based on the observations of it never happening by mindlessness. It's also by the logic I gave in my video you respond to, where I explain how mindless processes like erosion are overwhelmingly more regressive of order than progressive, and that means that they're ultimately not going to progress order to any high levels like that.
Maybe argue about the arguably order before we go on?
Atheists imagine that it is possible for sandcastle in millions of years or whatever to come about mindlessly.
No, I don't see any particular reason why it should.
He says, I don't see why sandcastles should come about mindlessly. But he believes life came about mindlessly.
Certainly not one as complex as what you're showing, anyway. Maybe one of those lame ones where somebody fills a...
Complex is what I'm showing. That you call this complex? Hold up. That's actually pretty basic. I mean, for it to be an actual castle, it needs more than just one tower. If you're referring to the so-called sandcastles that are just one tower, that's not a castle. That's just a sand tower. And even that is probably not going to be found with the symmetry that you find in one of these towers.
Nobody's found some mysterious pre-human...
Did you say something I missed? Hold on.
Requires a scientific explanation.
I want to deal with all of this
It's
shit.
your imagination. You made it up. And of course...
Yeah, I made up that you believe mindlessness did it, except that you reject mind did it. Therefore, you do believe mindlessness did it when it comes to DNA, for example. So if mindlessness can do DNA, it can also do sandcastles. So erosion should be able to do that, but you don't even trust in mindless forces to do it because you're a hypocrite. Because you know you don't have the footage you need. Sock man.
Of course it's not science.
You know what? If I argued with a literal sock, I would be getting better arguments. Silence is a better argument than fallacies.
There's nothing for science to do here.
Like your strawman fallacy in your very video, you omit all of my reasoning.
It's found some mysterious pre-human sandcastle that requires a scientific explanation. This, and of course it's not science. There's nothing for science to do here.
You're right, because science has already shown that mindlessness is a totally hopeless, pathetic alternative to intelligence did it as an explanation for the level of order of even a little sandcastle, let alone higher. So applying the standard across the board, we were certainly designed just as sandcastles were.
Nobody's found some mysterious pre-human sandcastle that requires a scientific explanation.
Exactly. They don't come about mindlessly.
This is pure fantasy.
Pure fantasy. Well, there's nothing wrong with using an imaginary scenario to depict an application of your blind faith in mindlessness as having done DNA. If it can do DNA, why can't mindless events like erosion do a little sandcastle? Atheists don't propose it because it's ridiculous, but when I propose it to some atheists, some of them say that erosion can do it, but that we just haven't seen it happen because they have that much faith.
That's just their delusion.
No, if anything, it's yours.
It's my delusion? Well, I already went over that.
The truth is,
not my delusion.
and you can see it for yourself at every beach, that if erosion makes a hole, it will fill it up again, so it goes back to square one.
Quickly, sure. That's a pretty safe assumption.
It's a pretty safe assumption. Right. Thank you for agreeing with me and empiricism.
If you see a hole on a beach, it probably won't be there forever. I mean, it's a beach. What I'm confused by is why you...
Yeah, it's a beach. It's not because it's a beach. It's because the forces are mindless. They have no intention to preserve the order. And that is why it will not be preserved. Logic. Use it sometime, Mr. Self-styled Logicked.
I think the hole is a prerequisite for the sandcastle. Like you said, it was the basement of the sandcastle.
A hole is not a prerequisite for a sandcastle. It is just an example of how one might come about if you imagine that erosion could make one.
Who puts a basement in their sandcastle?
Alright, don't call it a basement, call it a dungeon. You're nitpicking, man. You're nitpicking.
Order level rises a puny bit, then it goes back to 0. That's pathetic.
And nitpicking is a red herring fallacy. More fallacies from the atheist fanatic.
Alternative to intelligence is pathetic.
You think this is atheist's alternative to intelligent design?
Well, what is intelligent design? Mind did it or minds did it. The alternative to mind is mindlessness. Do you have a third option? No, of course you don't.
Well, hell, no wonder you say we're deluded and gullible. Who told you this crap?
I don't... look, it isn't crap to deduce logically that if you reject mind, that means you embrace the only alternative to mind, which is the lack of mind, aka mindlessness, such as erosion exemplifies. It isn't crap. You're just lying. That is what you believe. You just don't want to admit that's what you believe, because atheists pretend to have no position because their position is indefensible. And if they convince people that they have no position, then they are practically invisible and invincible. They cannot be touched. But I know where you are, and your smoke screen of denial cannot hide your presence. I know where to shoot you.
And this has been going on for thousands of years. Everyone can see how pathetic atheism is.
Holes on the beach getting filled up with more sand has been going on for thousands of years? Yeah, that seems pretty likely.
Yeah, that seems pretty likely that mindlessly no sandcastle can be formed. Mindlessly, that level of order is too much for your alternative to intelligent design. Therefore, your alternative to intelligent design is absolute shit.
Holes on the beach oftentimes get filled up, so that's your claim disproven.
You're omitting my reasoning entirely here. My reasoning is that erosion is mindlessness. Mindlessness is the only alternative to intelligent design. And erosion exemplifies mindlessness. So it's a good example for empirical observations testing the atheist position that mindlessness can do what others say intelligent design is necessary for. Omitting my reasoning in your title, omitting my reasoning in your video over and over again, beating up a strawman version of me, this shows how weak you are. This shows how pathetic you are. This shows how dishonest you are. And self-righteous, because you think you're a good person, but you're not.
I'm so logical.